Welcome to Innovate Pasadena Presents. I'm your host, Beth Kuchar, president of Innovate Pasadena. And today we're talking with Minnie Ingersoll, who's a new partner at TenOneTen Ventures. Welcome, Minnie. Thank you for joining us.
Thanks, Beth. Good to be here.
So tell me a little bit about your new role at TenOneTen.
Sure. I am, as you say, a new partner at TenOneTen, and we are a early stage venture capital fund. Focused mostly on the seed stage, but seed has grown to mean many different things. So writing checks of about $500,000 to $1 million into entrepreneurs in the greater LA area and sometimes elsewhere.
Great. And so if I'm not mistaken, you recently moved back here from the Bay Area, correct?
That's right. I'm from Pasadena, grew up here my whole life, just down the street actually, and my folks have stayed. My dad's still a professor at Caltech, and I moved to the Bay Area, went to Stanford, and then stayed for the past maybe 25 years in the Bay Area.
Wow.
Yeah, and you know, it's a great place to be. I've been in technology that whole time, and it just became the right time to move back to Pasadena. So very excited to be back.
So what did you study at Stanford?
I studied computer science. I thought I was going to study math, but this is the mid-90s, and it became very clear that there was a lot of innovation coming out of the computer science department, so I went there.
Made a good move.
Yeah.
So after you graduated, you were at Google for quite a time.
Yeah, so I graduated, I was at a company called LivePerson. We did online chat for e-commerce. They're still around. It was great. It was exciting. We IPO'd in March of 2000.
Oh, wow.
That was fantastic, and then the bubble burst.
Just hit that cutoff.
Yes, and so that's why I went back to business school, actually. So I haven't been in the Bay Area the entire time. So I went to Harvard Business School in 2000 to 2002, and then was sure that I was ready to move back to the Bay Area, and that's when I joined Google in 2002.
And you were there for a while, or?
Yeah, so I joined, there were about 500 people. It was the biggest company I was looking at the time.
Wow.
So I was like, more than 500 people wouldn't suit me so well. So I joined then, and then we were doubling in size every 6 months. So that was for the first number of years. And that was just a drinking from the fire hose, exciting place to be. So I stayed for 11 and a half years.
Wow, that's a long time to stay. What did you do while you were there? Must have had a lot of interesting roles to play.
Yeah, there were many different things, but I was a product manager. And when I started as a product manager, I didn't really know what I was expected to do as a product manager. So, and I think a lot of people in 2002, it was just a newer discipline. Mm-hmm. So there were fewer people to learn from, but it was a great group. So I stayed in product management. But at first it was in search and ads because that's all there was. Right. And I did a lot of, when I started, we were not yet a public company. We were a multi-billion-dollar company based in 20-cent increments. So I was helping work on our billing system, which it was actually an interesting challenge to figure out how do you get all of the server logs of 20-cent clicks into an invoice in Oracle that you send out 3 days after the month ends. So that was an interesting challenge. But then around 2006, I moved into the access team, which was about getting more people online at faster speeds and lower prices. And we worked on a variety of interesting access challenges, everything from Muni Wi-Fi to access to information in repressive societies.
Wow.
Yeah. So it was that's what kept it lively for 11 and a half years.
So 11 and a half years, you're having fun. It sounds like you're working on a lot of interesting challenges. What is it that actually pulled you away from that?
Right, so why did I leave Google to go start a used car company? Which is what I did, there were a variety of things. And one thing was that I did have my first child then, which I think often ends up being an interesting chance to sort of reflect on like life priorities and how we're gonna balance this in new dynamics. But in my case, my co-founder, his name is George, he had worked for me at Google, and he'd been talking to me about this idea for this startup for a long time. I was on maternity leave. I said, I'll help you get it started, which is interesting because then it became sort of my life's work for the next 5 years or so.
It turns into much more.
Yes, it turns out that with most startups, help get it started, you might think it means 5 months, but actually it takes a long time to get something really started. So it was sort of that I committed to doing it for a little while, and then the startup bug really hit, and it was very addictive.
And so you jumped into the deep end with
him. Absolutely. I said, this cushy job at Google that pays well and has lots of benefits. No, I'll go start my own thing and ride that roller coaster while having a new baby.
No safety net, right?
No, it was, but it was, for me, I sort of thought I can go back to Google. Like Google isn't going anywhere. And that sort of excitement every night when I was going to bed thinking about this startup. There were a lot of things that, especially after more than a decade at Google, were very appealing about moving to the startup life.
So once in a lifetime opportunity. If you don't do it now, you don't know when the next chance comes along.
Yeah, and there were just, we had ideas. We want to build a new website for people to order a car. Like, we're selling cars, so this car is going to come to your house. We're going to build this website. We had this idea, and we built it and launched it 6 weeks later.
Wow.
And Google doesn't, you don't have that at Google where you can just, I'm going to, write it out. I'm going to do some wireframes on this piece of paper and then give it to some developers overseas and get it launched in 6 weeks. So that pace became very enticing.
So were you at all prepared for the startup life from, your time at Google, or was there a lot of change and learning involved?
There were some things that were very applicable and relevant, and then there were some other things where I thought, oh my gosh, what have I just done? And so some things, I'd been an angel investor for a while, but that still doesn't prepare you for actually doing it yourself. Right. I'd said that I was being quite entrepreneurial at Google. When I was there, I kept telling myself, at least, I'm helping start these new initiatives at Google, things like Mini Wi-Fi, Google Fiber. I was part of their founding, so I felt like a founder. But it turns out that being a founder within the confines of this wonderful Google ecosystem is nothing like having to go get your own office. And at our first office, you couldn't turn off the lights without also turning off the refrigerator. I mean,
things you're not prepared for.
Yeah, right. I mean, it's just like there wasn't a whole support system. There wasn't someone else to go figure out what was going on with the fuses in the walls or something.
So now you're the electrician as well as the operations
person. Yes, or the fridge cleaner if someone turns off the lights.
If they turned off the lights.
Yes.
So tell me about the experience that you had building Shift and spinning it up, and it's very successful now. What was that process like?
It was fabulous, like up and to the right, like a roller coaster that was sometimes backwards and upside down. It was great. Like, it was a very intense for us experience of not just building a company, but like an emotional experience. Like, not the same as having a child, but there was some parts of it that, for me, it was about learning how to build a business. I built products, but this was like learning to build a company, which has different things, and also then learning about myself and my emotional ability to hire people, grow teams, get along with my co-founders, fire people, raise money, all of that.
That is very emotional.
Yeah, sometimes in one day. I felt like.
So do you have a kind of a low point, or one of the most challenging things that happened during your time at Shift?
I had probably a variety of different, for better or for worse, part of the story I think of Shift is, and most startups, is that there are probably many different low points throughout the process. And in some sense, for me, it's been a process of like recalibrating what I can get through and still, show up the next day with a smile on my face. At one point we had to do a RIF, which I learned is the same thing as a layoff, but somehow people call it a RIF, a reduction in force, which is different than, firing someone because they're not performing well. Often you can, I think as a manager, as a skilled manager, which I think I'm constant process of becoming more skilled as a manager, but you can, I think, often fire people in a way that feels good all around. But I think a layoff, it's much harder to have that be something that leaves people feeling good. We essentially had the wrong model for part of our time at Shift, which is we are selling cars. And we decided to not only sell cars, but sell financing and warranties as well. And that actually changed the sort of workforce that we needed to have. And it meant that a lot of our workforce was then going to be an inside sales team, so people on the phone rather than people out in the field trying to make a much more complicated sale without the access to like sitting in front of a computer. Anyways, I had to show up at work that morning, and we decided to fire people individually as opposed to get them all in a room and fire them all at once.
Right.
But that meant that I had 15-minute increments sitting down with someone and saying, I need to fire you right now, you need to give me your keys and your laptop. And
just one after the other.
One after another, and it felt horrible, and I was losing sleep, my hair was falling out, I felt incredibly responsible. Some of it still sticks with me. Some people said things like, but this is the best job I've ever had, and I cried, and all of that. And then you get through it, and most of these people had a job a month later, and you realize that to some degree, it wasn't the worst thing I've ever been through.
Right.
It was something that you get through.
Right. Exactly.
And we had a variety of different times that were real lows and real challenges. And yet the more that we got through those challenges, I think it made us stronger and more able to sort of get through the next challenge.
You learn, you slog through it, and you grow from that challenge.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Well, we're going to be taking a short break, and I hate to be leaving on your lows, but we'll come back and talk about some of the high points as well in just a few moments.
Hi, I'm Bud Bishop from the Pasadena Bio-Collaborative Incubator. We're a nonprofit organization focused on economic development and job creation. We provide training opportunities for people wanting to join the life science workforce and support startup companies that need cost-effective wet laboratory space with shared use access to a wide range of equipment, along with office amenities and mentors that can help a young company be successful. Please call us at 626-507-8487 to arrange a site visit, or go to our website at pasadenabio.org to learn more. Thank you.
Technologies reinvent and changes itself all the time, so we have to keep up. Innovation is not a luxury. I think it's a necessity.
Hello, I'm Alan Edson, the president of the Pasadena branch of the NAACP, chartered in 1919. We are celebrating our 100th anniversary in Pasadena. I'm inviting you to join us by becoming a member and supporting us to ensure the political, educational, social, and economic equality of rights of all persons, and to eliminate racial discrimination. We encourage activism by both men and women of all ages. The change must start with you, because your lives matter. For more information, call the number on your screen or go to www.naacppasadena.org.
Welcome back to Innovate Pasadena Presents. I'm your host, Beth Kuchar, and we're here with Minnie Ingersoll. We were just discussing a low point with Shift, and I want to kind of now flip that around and talk about a high point or one of the best experiences that you had.
Yeah, there's a variety of different things that stand out to some degree. Building something that wasn't there before, I still get extremely excited when I see cars on the road that have our Shift plates on them.
Yeah.
And I point them out whenever I see them. And we have a big warehouse here in Commerce. We actually have a couple warehouses in LA. So we sell a lot of cars in LA, and so I still see them everywhere, and that's exciting. Hiring is probably also the other thing that has been incredibly fun. It gets all of my it's probably where I've spent the most of my time throughout my career is on hiring people, and I enjoy it a lot, and it feels like a huge win every time we hire someone amazing. One, when they accept the offer, and then two, when they thrive in the role and really you can then hand off your work to them. That's always great.
And you build a lot of ties. You get very attached to the team that you build, especially when they work hard for you.
Absolutely. I mean, they become you're sort of going through the trenches together. You really feel like you've become extremely close, and you get to know their families, and you get to know their ups and downs too, their highs and lows.
Exactly. So you did raise money for a shift. That must have also been a high point.
Yeah. Yes. I mean, we recently raised our Series D. And so that's nice. Yeah, that's nice because we've raised over $200 million, and we've raised a Series D, and Shift really has grown up from, it was just me and my co-founder. I'd show up at his apartment every day. And just, at 10 a.m. I'd say, George, like, get up. It's, it's 10 a.m. I've been awake for 4 hours at this point. And to have it be something that is now a stable entity in the world and just exists, and I have the freedom. So raising money is also sort of, it's stable. It's sort of grown up, and I'm able to then move back to Pasadena, which is where I've been trying to move for the past number of years. But I'd say raising money is ups and downs. Like I think it was also extremely challenging and at times daunting and hard, really.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So you've had a successful time building Shift up into an amazing company, but you did something else before you came back to Pasadena. I'd love for you to talk a little bit about Code for America.
Yeah, I became a COO at Code for America, which is a wonderful nonprofit that works with cities as well as with technologists to improve digital service delivery. With the goal of helping societies, really help us build societies that we want to live in, ultimately. And it turns out that that if you look at, Code for America focuses on the social services, social safety net services, and if you look at how much government spending is spent in this arena broadly, it is like $500 billion. And if you look at all of philanthropy, it's like $40 billion. So if you could just stick with those numbers for a second and think, okay, if we could make government 10% more efficient, it would dwarf all philanthropic spending. And you think, that might be possible to make, government 10% more efficient. And we worked on services, food, jobs, and justice. So helping people get food security, helping our criminal justice system improve, and helping economic development, helping people get jobs. It's incredibly powerful stuff to work on.
Yeah, that's a huge, those are big things to tackle.
They are, and there's a bit of, once you start working on those issues, it's hard to go back and want to work on things that are more frivolous.
Understandable.
Yeah.
So I see an interesting thread also with your background, even though you were in computer science, and that was your focus. It seems like you've been, product and operations all throughout your career. How have you found that call your name versus, being there coding something, building something?
Yeah, I see product management and computer science very tightly coupled, especially at a place like Google, where all of the product managers mostly are extremely technical, because was it Mark Andreessen who wrote Software Eats the World? Because there's just software in everything. And so even at a place like Code for America, which is working on government services, it's increasingly people, even people who have food insecurity, people who have housing insecurity, still have access to a cell phone and still are interacting with their government through digital means. And so so the operational aspect and the product management aspect still has a lot of staying close to technology. So I haven't gotten too far away from the tech side of things.
It's just pulling on experience to better understand how to solve those issues.
Yeah. And so I've been COO twice, but both have been at companies that are primarily engineering-led cultures and have heavy tech components.
Interesting.
Yeah.
So if you had advice to entrepreneurs that are starting out based on some of your experiences, is there one thing you discovered along this journey?
It might have been going back to the low points. I mean, I do think the emotional resilience aspect is extremely important, not just as an entrepreneur, but in life. And I think for me, the way I have probably built that up the most is by going for it. And so the more that I go for it, I then end up falling on my face more because you go for it and you're trying something that's hard, and you get criticized, you fail, people don't like it, you don't succeed, and then you learn that's part of the process, and you get up and keep going anyways. And there are times when I worked at Google and people thought it was the greatest place to work, and isn't it just, free massage every day? And it was hard at times, and there were days I didn't feel like getting out of bed, and you just have to show up and tell the truth and hope for the best. And that's sort of been my lesson of life so far.
Don't get dragged down, just get up again.
Yeah, and it's not always, you don't always want to, but sometimes it's still worth doing. You still have to show up. Yeah.
So I want to quickly touch upon the fact that you're a Pasadena local, and you spent all this time up in the Bay Area, but you're back again in the LA area and in Pasadena. How has it felt to come home and make that transition?
It's been fantastic. Pasadena has been such a great place to return to. I said it's like a breath of fresh air, which you never would have said about moving back to LA.
Yeah.
But it is. I think that there's real community here that is possible, perhaps in a way that maybe it's not impossible in the Bay Area, but it's harder in a place as saturated with tech and entrepreneurship as the Bay Area has become. I feel like Pasadena, especially the Pasadena innovation and entrepreneurship community, has community truly to it, and people are looking out for each other, and that's been fantastic. And maybe a decade ago or so, I thought I'd like to move back to LA, but I wasn't sure that there was a whole ecosystem, and I think a lot has changed and in the past decade or 2 decades since I've been gone, and it's been extremely welcoming and fun to just get plugged in with all that is going on here.
That's great.
Yeah.
So in your new role as an investor with TenOneTen Ventures, is there a particular industry or group or topic area, anything you're focusing on?
Yeah, we still are reasonably open to finding great entrepreneurs who have great founder market fit, but all of us have technical founder backgrounds. So because we're all technical and we've all been founders in the past, we do tend to lean towards engineers turned entrepreneurs. Seems to be our sweet spot. We're not like frontier tech, but we are quite technical in what we focus on, which I find is a good fit for Pasadena as well, which has a lot of robotics, machine learning, AI. There's a lot of tech in Pasadena that fits our investment thesis. So it's been fun for me to really try to plug in with the local ecosystem here, which we invest in all of LA. We're not only focused on Pasadena,
right.
But there's a lot here to tap into. So that's how I'd sort of describe us.
That's good. Good entry point.
Yeah.
Getting back in and getting your feet wet.
Yeah.
So I'm curious, what's the experience been like? Because you've been on the other side of the table, raising money for a company. Now the tables have turned and you get to, listen in on the pitches and assess those entrepreneurs.
Yeah.
What's that experience been like?
First off, it's been extremely fun. Like, I feel like I've landed in the best job in LA, so I feel very thankful for that. But they're different things. So one is it's made me feel better about my own fundraise because we see so many great pitches that we're not able to fund. Like, very sincerely, I would fund 10 times the number of companies and then we do fund, then we have the capacity of funding. And so there is still so much out in LA that is great, and the fact that we pass on something does not mean that it's not fundable, or sometimes it means there is some piece that needs to be improved. There's a key hire that needs to be made, or maybe someone just needs to work on their pitch. But a lot of times it's just, there is so much good stuff that we can't fund everything we want to see. And I feel like I'm like Oprah Winfrey. I want to be like, you should have $1 million, you should have $1 million. Like, it is, it's fantastic seeing all of that. And it makes me feel better because we at Shift, as I said, we raised a couple $100 million, but we got a lot of no's along the way, like lots of no's. And so I think sitting on the other side has made me feel better about that process. It also has helped me learn just some of the logistics of things that I might have done differently in terms of how we pitched. I see some pitches where people are like doing awkward handoffs between the co-founders, and I think, you know what? One of you should just pitch it. Like, they're just tactical things that I think that when you see hundreds of these, you just get better at sort of spotting what's working, what's not working.
Do you ever get the opportunity to pull some people aside afterwards and say, hey, next time don't do that?
Yes, absolutely, absolutely we do. And I think that a lot of times, whether someone is pitching me like formally or just talking, some of the best entrepreneurs are really asking for feedback and then are very open to it and I always say, take what works, leave the rest.
Right.
And if my feedback is the opposite of what someone else just told you, that's fine. But make it really easy for me to give feedback in a way that makes it easier for me if you're asking for the feedback.
Right. Be open and go out there and solicit new information.
Yeah. But it's tricky because I don't want to discourage people from doing their entrepreneurial work.
Right. Well, I would not get that sense from you.
Yeah.
You're very welcoming, and we're really happy to have you back in the community, back home, so to speak, and look forward to great things coming from, going out there and handing out money through TenOneTen Ventures.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I'm excited to see all the great stuff going on here.
Thank you very much for joining us, Minnie.
Thanks, Beth.
Thank you again to Minnie and to our audience. And remember, stay innovative, Pasadena.